A warning to our viewers. What you're about to watch is a true story. The following program contains content that some viewers may find disturbing. Viewer discretion is strongly advised. You're watching True Crime Buff HQ, seeking justice for children failed by the system. On the evening of October 13, 2024, a father in Harlem, New York, picked up his phone and dialed 911. His 4-year-old son wasn't responding. The child was barely breathing. When paramedics arrived at the apartment on West 140th Street, what they discovered would leave even the most experienced first responders struggling to process what they were seeing. A little boy, 4 years old, weighing just 19 pounds. To put that in perspective, 19 pounds is what a healthy 1-year-old weighs. This child was 4. He should have weighed between 30 and 44 pounds. His tiny body had almost no fat remaining. Medical professionals would later determine he was suffering from severe chronic malnutrition. He was dying, slowly and painfully, from starvation. But here's what made this case different from so many others. This child wasn't starving because his family couldn't afford food. When investigators searched the apartment, they found a working refrigerator. It was stocked with fresh produce. The cabinets contained food. So why was this little boy starving to death? Because the refrigerator had been turned to face the wall, making it impossible for small children to open it. Every cabinet containing food had zip ties securing the handles. The food was there. It was just kept deliberately out of reach. But perhaps the most disturbing part of this case isn't what happened inside that apartment. It's what happened outside of it. Child Protective Services had been contacted about this family at least 4 times since 2019. 4 separate reports, 4 opportunities to intervene, 4 chances to save these children. And 4 times the system failed to protect them. This is the story of how one little boy fell through the cracks and why his death should never have happened. My dear friend, before we go inside that apartment and examine what investigators found, I need to ask you for something important. Please hit the like button right now. Subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. And share this video, because every single share reaches more people who might recognize these warning signs and save a child before it's too late. In the comments, write your city and what time you're watching. This helps me understand when to publish these investigations so they reach the maximum number of people: teachers, nurses, neighbors, social workers, anyone who might be in a position to protect a child in danger. If this work matters to you, consider joining as a channel member or leaving a super thanks. Your support allows me to spend weeks researching cases like this one, reviewing court documents, analyzing official reports, interviewing experts, and piecing together how the system failed. This is the kind of in-depth investigation that mainstream media won't do. They cover these stories for one news cycle and move on. But together, we can make sure these children are never forgotten. My channel exists to tell the stories of children who needed protection but didn't receive it. These aren't just tragedies. They're lessons in recognizing danger. They're warnings we cannot afford to ignore. Watch the other videos on this channel. Understanding cases like these could one day help you notice the warning signs and protect a child who's suffering in silence, just like the children in that Harlem apartment. Thank you for your support. Now, let's examine what investigators discovered when they entered that home. When detectives from the New York Police Department entered the 3-bedroom apartment in Harlem, they thought they were responding to a medical emergency. What they found was evidence of something far more disturbing. The apartment was in a state of severe neglect, but one bedroom stood out from the rest. According to court documents, this room was covered in waste. The floor was barely visible beneath layers of filth. The walls bore marks of neglect up to the height where a small child could reach. Inside that room, investigators found a mattress propped against the wall, a few pieces of broken furniture, almost nothing else. But one detail caught their attention immediately. This bedroom, the one in the worst condition, was the only room in the entire apartment with a lock on the door. And that lock was installed on the outside. Someone had been able to lock people inside this room from the outside. The implications were clear to investigators. The 4-year-old boy wasn't the only child in that apartment. As investigators continued their search, they discovered 3 more children, a 5-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a 7-year-old. All of them were in serious medical distress. All of them were rushed to the hospital alongside their younger brother. When medical professionals at Harlem Hospital examined these children, what they observed was deeply troubling. The children showed signs of prolonged neglect. They had difficulty with basic tasks that children their age should have mastered years earlier. According to prosecutors, they struggled to hold utensils. They had trouble feeding themselves. These weren't developmental delays caused by disability. These were abilities that had never been allowed to develop because these children had been denied proper care for so long. Medical staff began the delicate process of providing nutrition. When someone has been deprived of adequate food for an extended period, you can't simply feed them normally. The body can react dangerously to sudden nutrition. Doctors had to proceed carefully, gradually reintroducing what these children had been denied. As the investigation expanded, authorities uncovered something that should have made these children impossible to overlook. None of them had ever been enrolled in school, not one. 4 children ranging in age from 4 to 7 years old, and not a single day of formal education among them. They had never been vaccinated. According to statements the mother made to investigators, she only brought the children to see a doctor in emergencies. Think about what that means. No teachers saw these children on a daily basis. No school nurses monitored their health or weight. No classmates could observe that something was wrong. No mandatory reporters had regular access to them. These 4 children had been effectively hidden from every system designed to protect them. They were invisible, and based on the evidence, that invisibility appears to have been deliberate. Despite the paramedics' efforts, the 4-year-old boy was in critical condition. He was transported to Harlem Hospital, where medical staff worked to save his life. But the damage from years of deprivation was too severe. According to reports, doctors determined that life-saving measures would not be successful. The little boy received end-of-life care. On October 14, 2024, he passed away. He was 4 years old. He weighed 19 pounds. The Office of the Chief Medical Examiner determined that his death was caused by chronic starvation, malnutrition, and dehydration. His condition wasn't sudden. It wasn't the result of a brief illness. According to medical professionals, it was chronic, meaning it had developed over an extended period of time. This little boy had been slowly dying for a long time, and no one had saved him. Here's what makes this case so difficult to accept. This family wasn't unknown to child welfare authorities. Since 2019, New York City's Administration for Children's Services, the agency responsible for protecting children from abuse and neglect, had received at least 4 separate reports about this family. 4 times someone saw something that concerned them enough to make an official report. 4 times the system was alerted that these children might be in danger. One of those reports specifically alleged that the children were malnourished. Someone looked at these kids and recognized that they weren't being properly fed. They did exactly what society asks people to do. They reported their concerns to the authorities. And what happened? According to sources familiar with the case, ACS investigated that malnutrition complaint and deemed it unsubstantiated. The case was closed. The children remained in the home. No ongoing monitoring was put in place. 5 years after the first report, a 4-year-old boy would die, weighing 19 pounds. To understand how this happened, we need to look at how New York City's child welfare system operates. In recent years, ACS has undergone significant changes in how it handles reports of abuse and neglect. The agency has expanded a program called CARES, which stands for Collaborative Assessment, Response, Engagement, and Support. The agency describes CARES as an alternative, non-investigatory child protection response to reports of child abuse. That phrase is important, non-investigatory. The idea behind CARES is that not every report requires a full investigation. For cases deemed lower risk, the program is designed to partner with families and help them access services, rather than conducting adversarial investigations that might damage family relationships. The intentions behind this approach aren't unreasonable. Investigations can be traumatic for families. Removing children from homes has its own serious consequences. The foster care system has well-documented problems. But critics argue that this approach has a fundamental flaw. How do you determine whether a situation is low risk without actually investigating it? According to a whistleblower who works within ACS, approximately 70% of cases are now channeled into this non-investigatory track. The question this case raises is simple. Was the malnutrition complaint about this family handled through CARES? And if so, was that the right call? We may never know. ACS is prohibited by law from disclosing details about specific cases. This 4-year-old boy was not an isolated tragedy. His death came during a period when New York City was seeing an alarming number of child fatalities involving families known to the child welfare system. According to reports, he was the 6th child in New York City to die from malnutrition-related causes within a 3-month period in 2024. The 6th. In July 2024, a 5-year-old boy in the Bronx died after ingesting methadone. According to police sources, his father had a previous arrest for acting in a manner injurious to a child. ACS was aware of the family. In August 2024, a 4-month-old infant died after ingesting cocaine. The death was ruled a homicide by the medical examiner. Earlier, in 2024, the death of a 2-month-old from a 2023 ketamine overdose was also ruled a homicide. Each of these cases shared a common element. The families involved had prior contact with child welfare authorities. A pattern was emerging, and it raised uncomfortable questions about whether the policies designed to keep families together were putting children at risk. It would be easy to blame individual caseworkers for these failures, but that would miss the larger picture. ACS is an agency in crisis. According to reports, approximately 30% of ACS workers have been on the job for less than 1 year. The turnover rate is extraordinary. Experienced caseworkers burn out and leave. New workers are thrust into overwhelming caseloads before they're fully trained. Sources within the agency have described a culture where caseworkers feel pressured to close cases quickly in order to manage their workloads. Some have called it rubber stamping, approving cases without thorough review simply to keep the numbers manageable. The workers aren't the problem. Many of them entered this field because they genuinely want to protect children. But they're operating within a system that doesn't give them the time, resources, or support they need to do their jobs effectively. When you combine high turnover, inadequate training, overwhelming caseloads, and policies that emphasize family preservation over child safety, you create conditions where tragedies become inevitable. This little boy's death wasn't just a failure of his parents, it was a failure of an entire system. One of the biggest obstacles to preventing future tragedies is the lack of transparency. Under New York state law, ACS cannot publicly disclose details about the families it works with. This is meant to protect children's privacy, a legitimate concern. But it also means that when a child dies, the public rarely learns the full story of what went wrong. How many times was the family reported? What did investigators find during their visits? Why were cases closed? What warning signs were missed? Without answers to these questions, there can be no accountability. And without accountability, the same mistakes will be repeated. ACS says it conducts internal reviews after every child fatality, but those reviews happen behind closed doors. The findings are rarely shared with the public or with lawmakers who might push for reform. The system investigates itself. And somehow, the system keeps failing. The children's mother was 26 years old. Their father was 25. Both had been living in the Harlem apartment with their 4 children. To neighbors in the building, the family might not have seemed unusual. According to reports, the mother was described as someone who appeared to care about children. She would express concern about kids in the neighborhood. But what was happening behind her apartment door told a very different story. One neighbor would later share an observation with reporters that captured the disconnect between the mother's public persona and private behavior. The neighbor said she once saw the mother purchase food, specifically a chicken, and eat it outside the building before going back upstairs to the apartment. When asked why she was eating outside, The mother allegedly responded that she didn't want to eat it upstairs because the children would beg for it. Think about that for a moment. A mother eating food outside her own home, specifically to avoid her hungry children seeing her eat. This wasn't poverty. This wasn't a mother who couldn't afford to feed her children. This was a mother who had food and chose not to share it with them. When investigators questioned both parents, their explanations didn't hold up to scrutiny. The father claimed he hadn't noticed his son's deteriorating condition. His explanation? He said he was often playing video games or on his phone. He told investigators that if the children asked for food, he would provide it. But the evidence contradicted this claim. A child doesn't reach 19 pounds by occasionally missing meals. That level of malnutrition takes sustained deprivation over an extended period. The mother offered a different excuse. She claimed the 4-year-old had been sick and vomiting for months. She suggested he must have lost weight because he couldn't keep food down. But the medical examiner's findings contradicted this as well. The boy's condition was described as chronic. This wasn't sudden weight loss from illness. This was the result of prolonged, systematic deprivation. Prosecutors would later present evidence suggesting this wasn't mere neglect. It was deliberate. The refrigerator full of fresh produce turned to face the wall so the children couldn't access it. The zip ties on cabinet handles, preventing small hands from reaching the food inside. The bedroom with a lock on the outside of the door. According to court documents, both parents purchased food and prepared meals for themselves on a regular basis while their children went hungry. This allegedly continued for approximately 2 years. The prosecution's position is clear. This wasn't a case of parents who didn't know better or who were overwhelmed by circumstances beyond their control. This was, according to prosecutors, a deliberate choice made repeatedly over an extended period. In November 2024, a Manhattan grand jury handed down indictments against both parents. The charge? Murder. Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg released a statement that reflected the gravity of the case. The death of Jahmeik Modlin, an innocent 4-year-old child, is a tragedy that has scarred this city. That he died a slow and painful death, starving alongside his older siblings, somehow isolated in the heart of Harlem, is a stain on our collective conscience. The district attorney continued, "Today his parents are indicted for allegedly killing him through extreme physical neglect and persistent abuse with depraved indifference for his life. Both parents are currently being held at Rikers Island, awaiting trial. If convicted, they face significant prison sentences. The legal process is ongoing. Both defendants are presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law, but the evidence presented by prosecutors paints a deeply troubling picture of what life was like for 4 children hidden away in that Harlem apartment. In the aftermath of the 4-year-old's death, his maternal aunt stepped forward to demand answers. Nisha Ragsdale had lost her nephew. She wanted to know why. ACS failed the kids, she told reporters. They could have done something. They need to fix the system, their rules, their regulations, the whole thing. She asked a question that deserves an answer. Why are these things happening? It's a question that echoes beyond this single case. When a child welfare agency receives multiple reports about a family over a 5-year period and a child still dies of malnutrition, something is fundamentally wrong. The aunt took legal action. She filed a $40 million notice of claim against New York City, the first step toward a formal lawsuit. The claim alleges that ACS had been notified about malnourishment and neglect involving this family on multiple occasions. It states that despite these reports, and despite direct requests for assistance from the children's mother herself, the city failed to take appropriate actions to investigate thoroughly and intervene. According to the claim, the city neglected to remove the children from the harmful environment, which allowed the condition to worsen, leading to the 4-year-old's death. The lawsuit seeks to hold the city accountable for the failures of its child welfare system. The case drew attention from civil rights leaders and community advocates. Reverend Al Sharpton and his National Action Network joined the family for a press conference outside ACS headquarters. They demanded an investigation into the agency's handling of the case. A vigil was held outside the Harlem apartment where the children had suffered. Community members lit candles and released balloons in memory of the little boy who never got a chance to grow up. But for many, symbolic gestures weren't enough. They wanted systemic change. In the wake of this case and others like it, lawmakers have proposed reforms to how child welfare agencies operate. One proposal would require caseworkers to photograph children during home visits. The logic is simple. A photograph provides objective evidence that supervisors can review. It's harder to overlook obvious signs of malnutrition when there's photographic documentation. You can't fake a photo of a child that weighs 19 pounds, argued one state assemblyman who supports the measure. When we're talking about children dying, we have to act immediately. Other proposed reforms include lower caseloads for investigators, better training on recognizing signs of malnutrition, stricter standards for when cases can be closed, and greater transparency when children die. Former New York Governor David Paterson, who championed child welfare reform after an earlier high-profile child death, has called for giving ACS more discretion to remove the child from parents if there's evidence that a child is endangered. Whether these reforms will be implemented remains to be seen. The political will for change often fades once the headlines move on to the next story. There's one aspect of this case that complicates the narrative. According to Reverend Kevin McCall, who spoke with the mother after her arrest, she claims she had reached out to ACS for help before her son's death. McCall says the mother told him she had contacted social workers about domestic violence in the home. She had asked for mental health services. She had, according to her account, been crying for help. She stressed to me that she was crying for help and no one answered, McCall told reporters. This raises a difficult question. If a parent recognizes they need help and reaches out to the system, and the system fails to provide that help, does that change anything about responsibility? Legally, it may not matter. Both parents face murder charges. The prosecution's case is built on the evidence of what happened to the children, not on what services the parents did or didn't receive. But from a policy perspective, it's a question worth considering. If families in crisis ask for help and don't receive it, are we setting up conditions for tragedy? The answer doesn't excuse what happened to these children. Nothing can excuse that. But it might help us understand how to prevent similar tragedies in the future. The 4-year-old boy didn't survive. But his 3 siblings, the 5-year-old, the 6-year-old, and the 7-year-old, are still here. And their story isn't over. When they arrived at the hospital alongside their brother, all 3 were in serious condition. They showed signs of the same prolonged neglect that had claimed their siblings' life. Medical staff began the careful process of helping their bodies recover. Nutrition had to be reintroduced gradually. Their systems had to adjust to receiving proper care. In the weeks following their hospitalization, something remarkable began to happen. With proper nutrition and care, the children started to improve. According to prosecutors, abilities that had been absent when they arrived, like holding utensils, like feeding themselves, began to return as nutrients were reintroduced to their bodies. Basic skills that had been suppressed by years of deprivation started to emerge. The children were learning things that most kids master as toddlers, but they were learning. They were growing. They were recovering. The 3 surviving children are now in the custody of child welfare officials. Their road to recovery will be long. The effects of prolonged malnutrition during childhood don't disappear overnight. Medical experts say that severe deprivation during critical developmental years can have lasting impacts on physical health, on cognitive development, on emotional well-being. These children may need therapy and support for years to come. They may carry the effects of what they experienced for the rest of their lives, but they're alive. They're safe. And for the first time in their young lives, they're receiving the care that every child deserves. The 4-year-old boy was laid to rest on October 29, 2024. His name was Jahmeik Modlin. He never got to go to school. He never got to make friends his own age. He never got to play sports or learn to read or experience the simple joys that childhood should contain. He spent his 4 years on this earth largely hidden from the world, hungry, neglected, waiting for help that never came. He deserved so much better. They all did. What happened in that Harlem apartment isn't unique to New York City. Across the country, child welfare agencies are struggling with the same fundamental tensions. How do you balance keeping families together with keeping children safe? How do you give parents chances to improve while protecting kids from parents who won't? There are no easy answers. Removing children from their homes is traumatic. Foster care has serious problems of its own. Many children who enter the system end up worse off than if they'd stayed with struggling families. But leaving children in dangerous situations has consequences too, sometimes fatal ones. The pendulum swings back and forth. After high-profile child deaths, agencies crack down, removing more children, erring on the side of caution. Then concerns about over-intervention lead to reforms emphasizing family preservation. Then another child dies, and the cycle repeats. Child welfare experts say that effective child protection requires resources that most agencies simply don't have. It requires caseworkers with manageable workloads who have time to thoroughly investigate each report. It requires ongoing training on recognizing signs of abuse and neglect. It requires supervisors who review cases carefully rather than rubber-stamping closures. It requires a system that treats child safety as the top priority. Not paperwork, not family preservation ideology, not caseload management. But building that system requires money, and political will, and sustained attention to a problem that most people would rather not think about. Perhaps the most troubling aspect of this case is how close these children came to never being discovered at all. 4 children who had never been enrolled in school, who had barely seen doctors, who were effectively invisible to every institution designed to identify children at risk. How many other children are out there right now, hidden from view, suffering in silence? We don't know, and that's precisely the problem. Mandatory education laws exist in part because schools serve as a safety net, a place where trained adults see children regularly and can notice when something is wrong. But those laws only work if they're enforced. These 4 children slipped through every crack. And until a 911 call brought first responders to their door, no one in a position to help them knew they existed. 4 reports to Child Protective Services, 5 years of warning signs, 1 little boy who didn't survive, 3 siblings still fighting to recover. This case isn't just a tragedy, it's a warning. It shows what happens when systems designed to protect children prioritize process over people. When warning signs are documented but not acted upon, when unsubstantiated becomes a death sentence. The parents who allegedly starved these children will face justice in a court of law. The legal system will hold them accountable for what happened inside that apartment. But the system that failed to save these children, that system remains in place. The same policies, the same resource constraints, the same pressures that contributed to this tragedy still exist. And somewhere right now, another child may be waiting for help that won't arrive in time. If you suspect a child is being abused or neglected, please make the call. The Child Help National Child Abuse Hotline is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 1-800-422-4453. That's 1-800-4A-CHILD. Don't assume someone else will report it. Don't wait until you're certain. If something feels wrong, trust your instincts and make the call. You might be wrong. The family might be fine. But you might also be the one person who notices what everyone else missed. And if you make a report and nothing seems to happen, don't give up. Report again. Be persistent. Follow up. Ask questions. Be the voice for a child who doesn't have one. This channel exists to tell the stories of children who needed protection but didn't receive it. These aren't just tragic stories. They're lessons in recognizing danger. They're evidence of systems that need to change. They're reminders that child protection isn't someone else's responsibility. It belongs to all of us. If this investigation mattered to you, please subscribe. Share this video with teachers, with nurses, with social workers, with parents, with neighbors. The more people who understand the warning signs, the more children we can protect. Because every child deserves to be safe. Every child deserves to be seen. Every child deserves someone who will fight for them. Jahmeik Modlin didn't get the protection he deserved. Let's make sure his story helps protect others.